Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and this is who I think wins the Super Bowl. Okay, we start off in the AFC, where I've already broken down three divisions. I'll just give you a quick reminder. I think the Steelers win the AFC North at 12-5, tied with the Bengals based on tiebreakers. I think they advance to that home playoff game. But the Browns, I do think, sneak in with an 11-6 record. If I am wrong about this, then it completely opens the door at 10-7, and that 7 seed is up for grabs. But I think the Ravens just miss out at 10-7. I think they kind of fall apart at the end of the year. The AFC West, I was wrong about week 1. I did think the Chiefs would win, but because it's an NFC matchup, it possibly has no ramifications at all. I had them going 14-3. Now it would be 13-4. And as long as they win in week 2 over Jacksonville, it's not going to matter. They will still have the tiebreaker at 13-4 for the number 1 seed. I have the Chargers going 12-5. They will be a wild card team, and I have the Broncos now at 9-8. I think they're going to really struggle to start the season with Jerry Jeudy and that hamstring injury. I've completely lost faith in the Raiders. They will go 2-15, be in the sweepstakes for Caleb Williams. But I do have the Jaguars at 13-4, so that week 2 game is really important. If they can somehow win it against Kansas City, I think Travis Kelce needs to miss it in order for it to matter. Then I would have to shift this, but I have the Jags as the 2 seed. I have the rest of the AFC South missing the playoffs. The Titans go 7-10, the Texans go 5-12, and the Colts go 4-13. But I did also break down the AFC East. I think the Dolphins win it at 11-6. Hopefully Tua can stay healthy, but I think the Bills and the Jets just miss out at 10-7. If I'm wrong about the Browns, then the Bills will sneak in with that number 7 seed. The Jets will not. But the Patriots are going to go 9-8. Pretty competitive team, but barely above 500. So that is my AFC playoff picture. I have the Chiefs as the 1 seed, the Jags as the 2 seed, the Steelers as the 3, the Dolphins as the 4, facing off against the Chargers at the 5, the Bengals at 6, going to play the Steelers in that wildcard game, and then the Browns will face off against the Jags as the 7 seed. We'll get to my picks in just a minute, but let's talk the NFC. I have spoken about the NFC East before, but that was back in May, and I've updated my opinion. I am no longer down on the Giants. I think the Giants are actually going to be just fine, even though their schedule is very tough, a lot of road games to start the season. I think they're actually going to be really good, really competitive, and I think they are going to win this division at 11-6. I see a really, really interesting battle here. I'm a little bit lower on the Eagles. It's not that I don't think they're going to be good, but I think they're going to pull back. Their second half of the season schedule is brutal. They are going to lose 4 straight following the bye at Kansas City versus Buffalo versus San Francisco and at Dallas. They're going to lose at least one of those games against Dallas. So 4 losses surrounding the bye week. And then even if they win versus Arizona week 17, it's kind of irrelevant. It's going to come down to week 18 versus the Giants. And that game is in New Jersey. It's a home game for the Giants, and I'm going to give it to New York. So I see a bit of a trap game week 17 because it's really something that you can write off in terms of tiebreakers. So that's what I expect. A great start to the season, but a bit of a debacle towards the end. They're going to fall apart with a very, very difficult schedule. But the Cowboys, I think, are going to be a little bit better than I gave them credit for. Just by 1 game, I see them going 9-8, but I see them firing Mike McCarthy at the bye. I only see a win versus Arizona, and that one's a gimme. They're going to lose against the Giants, the Jets, the Patriots, the Niners, and the Chargers. That one's going to be critical because it's their former offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who beats them. So they will move on to Dan Quinn, and that defense will take over. The identity of the team is going to shift, and they will rattle off 7 straight wins starting in week 10 that is going to be the difference for them. It's really going to be a hell of a late season push by them, but I see a loss versus Detroit and then an irrelevant game at Washington to kind of prevent them from getting in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes themselves. But the Commanders, I have at 4-13, so I originally had them at 2-15, so they'll be a little bit better, but nothing special. A team that I'm kind of writing off. So the Giants win the NFC East, and that will be, I believe, the 18th year in a row where there is a new division champ. It's either year 18 or 19 in a row. It has changed every single season since 2004. But in the NFC West, very interesting division. I've pretty much written off the Rams. I originally had them as a possible playoff team, but now I have them 5-12, especially with Cooper Kupp dealing with a hamstring injury early. They are going to have a rough one, and if they deal with another injury to possibly Aaron Donald or Stafford, then you can write them off completely. They'll finish 5-12, third in the division. I have the Cardinals as the worst team in the league, going 2-15, but if they make the mistake of starting Kyler Murray at the end of the year, I see 2 upset victories in trap game format after the bye versus San Francisco. That one's in division, so usually a tough matchup. They're going to play up to competition in that one. But at Philadelphia, I think the Eagles are just going to completely overlook them. And at 2-15, we'll see if they will have the tiebreaker for that number 1 overall pick. I think a lot of teams are going to be vying for Caleb Williams this year. There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this year's draft. But I have the Seahawks going 9-8, finishing second in the division. I think they'll be just as good as last season. And at 9-8, above 500, that will be enough to make the playoffs. I think the Seahawks will be the number 7 seed yet again. But I do have the Niners winning it. I feel like that's kind of obvious. I'm not fully sure about Brock Purdy to start the season. I think he's going to lose at Pittsburgh, but start to get going starting with that Rams game. And if for some reason they have to pivot to Sam Darnold, I think they'll be okay. I think their defense and the overall roster is good enough to win pretty much almost all the time. So 12-5 is my prediction, and they would get the number 1 seed if not for a trap game loss, Week 15 at Arizona. The Cardinals are going to play spoiler at the end of the year. But let's take a look at the NFC North, where originally I had the Lions losing in Week 1. But with that win, I think it's going to be very compelling. I think they have a shot at the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. So now I have them going 13-4. I only see a loss at Baltimore, at the Chargers, at Chicago, and at Minnesota. A couple divisional losses, and then a couple tough teams in the Ravens and the Chargers. So the Lions are legit. That defense looked good, and that offense, while Marvin Jones did cause some problems, they could have won a lot more convincingly on Thursday night if he didn't fumble in the red zone. But I do see a big pullback for the Vikings. They had a lot of close wins last year, and at 13-4, there's a big target on their back. They lost to the Giants in the playoffs, and I think they're going to have a rough start. They will win against Tampa, will beat the Chiefs in upset fashion, but I see 2 3-game losing streaks against Philly, the Chargers, and Carolina. Revenge game for Adam Thielen there. And then Chicago's going to beat them, the Niners are going to beat them, and then the Packers will also beat them at home. So 2-6 start to the season, a little bit too difficult to overcome. And even though they'll finish 6-3, it just won't be enough. At 8-9, I see the Vikings missing the playoffs. But the Bears could finish 9-8 instead of 8-9. That would put them possibly in playoff contention, but I think it's just going to be a little bit too tough. That final Week 18 game at Green Bay will be the deciding factor there. But they're going to start off red hot, 5-2. I then see 5 straight losses against some tough teams here. The Chargers, the Saints versus Carolina, a bit of a toss-up, but I do think Bryce Young will figure it out mid-season. And then in division on the road at Detroit, at Minnesota. Some tough games on the road, but then a bye week and then 3 more wins. They'll be 8-9, much improved from last season. Very entertaining to watch, but just barely missed the playoffs by 1 game. So it's gonna be fun to see them on the field. That's for sure. But unfortunately, they will miss the playoffs just barely. The Packers, however, I have very little confidence in. I just don't trust Jordan Love. I don't really trust Matt LaFleur. And I feel like this team is like one key injury on the defense away to really having a rough time. Like, if you told me Jair Alexander goes down, I have a very difficult time picking the Packers. I think that defense is going to be the difference maker in a lot of these games. But even if Aaron Jones goes down, that's definitely possible. I would be very worried about their offense as well. Christian Watson already dealing with a hamstring injury. That is not ideal. So 4 straight losses to start the season. Then they'll win 3 out of 4. They're kind of going to give you a little bit of optimism surrounding the bye. But then it's going to be brutal. I see, 8 straight losses. I mean, this is a tough schedule here. Pittsburgh, the Chargers, Detroit, the Chiefs, the Giants, Tampa Bay, Carolina, and Minnesota. Maybe they should beat Tampa, but I don't even think that's going to happen. I've given it to Tampa because Tampa has to win at least one or so game at some point in the year. So 4-13 is my projection for the Packers. Gonna be rough with Jordan Love as essentially a rookie in his first full season as the starter. So the Lions advance, but nobody else from this division gets in. The NFC South, however, is the most unpredictable, very competitive, maybe between themselves, not so much the rest of the league, but this division is completely up for grabs. Going to be really interesting to see what happens. But I do have the Saints winning it. I think they're going to start off really well with Derek Carr kind of a little extra adrenaline pumping, trying to prove something. He's got a chip on his shoulder after being cut by the Raiders, and I think they're going to start off really well. Basically, they will go 7-2 to start the year, but then kind of fall apart, going 3-5 the rest of the way. It will be enough, in my opinion, however, because the Panthers are going to start off really, really slow. That's typically what happens with a Frank Reich team. They sometimes can't get it going in the month of September and then start to figure it out late October and rattle off a ton of wins. So they'll start off 1-5. Their only win I see as a upset versus Minnesota. Terrible defense for the Vikings. And then after the bye, I think Bryce Young is going to be really, really good. I have them going 8-3. Starting in week 8, and their schedule really opens up. Like, they can definitely beat the Texans, the Colts, the Bears. That's possible. They can definitely beat Tampa, New Orleans at least once, the Falcons at least once in division. I have them beating the Packers, and then I also have them beating Tampa yet again. So 9-8, very impressive for Bryce Young, but it's not going to be enough. It's just unfortunate that they lose to Seattle week 3 and Dallas week 11 in these projections, because if they could just win one of those games, they would have the tiebreaker at 9-8, and they would sneak in over one of those two teams. But I have them losing. It's not going to happen. They will just barely miss the playoffs on tiebreakers. But the Falcons are really interesting. I could be wrong here, but I have them kind of falling apart at the end of the season. They will go 6-4 to start the year. Going to be really interesting with a healthy Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson fully healthy as well. I think they could shock some people. And if I'm wrong at the end of the season, they could absolutely win this division. Wouldn't surprise me if that happened. But after the bye, I think the schedule is really tough. I see a loss versus the Saints, a loss at the Jets. They will beat Tampa. However, I don't think they'll win on the road against the Panthers. And then the Colts, I think, will get it going late season. I think they can upset them. And then at Chicago, at New Orleans, 2 tough road games to close the season. Maybe they win one of those, but even they need 2 of those wins, at least one of them against the Saints and then one against Carolina, to really shift this in their favor. Maybe it happens. Maybe I'm wrong. It's going to be really close, but this division completely up for grabs. It's going to be one of the Saints, Panthers, or Falcons, and I chose the Saints at 10-7. But the Bucs are going to be in contention for Caleb Williams at 2-15. There's going to be a race to the bottom for that elite quarterback. And even if they don't get that number 1 overall pick, there's still some good options behind him. It's just not the same thing as Caleb Williams. So the Bucs, we don't need to get into. They'll be terrible. They'll probably have a fire sale and trade away a bunch of pieces. At the very least, I don't think Mike Evans will finish the year in Tampa. But that is my NFC playoff picture. I have the Detroit Lions as the number 1 seed at 13-4. I have the Niners as the 2 seed. They're going to face off against the Seattle Seahawks at number 7. And then I have the Giants at number 3, the Cowboys at number 6, and the Saints at number 4 facing off against the Eagles as the number 5 seed. So the Lions will advance, and I think they're going to take on the Cowboys, who I think will beat the Giants. I do think they will have their number going to be much better at the end of the season as opposed to the beginning. And even though I think the Giants beat them week 1, I think the Cowboys beat them the 3rd time around and get the win in the playoffs. So that'll be an interesting matchup, the Lions versus the Cowboys. And then I do think the Eagles will definitely beat the Saints, and I think the Niners will beat the Seahawks. That's going to be a rematch of the NFC title game last season. So I will take the Niners. I think they will advance, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if it was the Eagles. They have the better quarterback, but I think the Niners are just going to be so hungry after the way last season ended. They only lost because their quarterback couldn't play, and I think they will have a little extra motivation to get that win. So the Niners advance to the NFC Championship game. And as much as I would like to take the Cowboys, fuck it, I'm going to take the Lions. I'm going with the Lions. I'm a believer. I mean, they looked really good on Monday night. That defense was very impressive, and I would much rather see the Lions win than the Cowboys. So give me the Lions against the Niners in the NFC Championship game, but I think that's as far as it goes for the Lions. I will then take the Niners to move on. I think the Niners have the better roster. And look, it's the first time the Lions are this deep in the playoffs since like forever. There's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be a little bit too high of an expectation on them, and I do think the Niners will get it done. So the Niners making it to the Super Bowl this year, 3rd time in like a decade or so. Since Colin Kaepernick, they have made it a few times. But in the AFC, probably the more interesting division that I teased at the beginning, I do have the Chiefs as the 1 seed, so they will advance here. And then I do think that the Bengals will beat the Steelers. I think because they're a little bit rusty to start the season, that's the only reason they get the wild card spot, not the divisional spot. And even on the road, I do think they're better than the Steelers. I think Joe Burrow will get the dub. So he's going to advance, and that's going to be a very, very interesting matchup against the Chiefs because I don't see the Browns beating Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars will definitely advance as well. So last matchup here, 5 versus 4, the Chargers versus the Dolphins. I picked the Chargers to win week 1. I don't trust the offensive line completely for the Dolphins, and it's possible that Tua isn't even upright for that matchup. Give me the Chargers with confidence in the wildcard game. So going to be a rematch of last year's Jags versus Chargers game, and then another rematch of the Bengals and Chiefs. And I do not think the Chargers blow it this time. I think they will keep things together, score more than 3 points in the second half, and they will avenge that loss. They will beat Trevor Lawrence and advance to the AFC Championship game. Call me a homer, I don't fucking care, but the Chargers, if they can stay healthy, have one of the best rosters in the NFL, and this is possibly their last best chance to do it because all of those stars that they added 2 off seasons ago were on 2-year contracts, so next year is going to be much different. Eckler's going to be a free agent. Mike Williams is going to be a free agent. I think even Keenan Allen's going to be a free agent, so I don't know what it's going to look like next year, but the Chargers will get it done this season. The Kellen Moore addition at OC is the difference here. Give me the Chargers in the AFC Championship game. But I will take the Bengals over the Chiefs. We saw a little bit of it on Thursday night. Without Travis Kelce, they just didn't have the receivers to feel confident in. And I'm not saying Kelce's going to go down again, but I just think the Bengals are one of the few teams that can really compete with them. They will keep it close. And last year it was only like a field goal game. It's going to go either way, completely up for grabs in this matchup, but I will take the Bengals because similar logic. Their roster is going to look much different next season. They won't be able to pay at least T. Higgins, and their receiving core doesn't have a long time left to get it done. So in the AFC Championship game, we're going to see the two best quarterbacks from that 2020 draft class, Joe Burrow versus Justin Herbert. And while we haven't seen these two teams face off that much, the Chargers actually match up really, really well against the Bengals. And if you go back, I believe 2 seasons, they beat them pretty comfortably. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the defense is going to be too much for the Bengals to handle. Give me my Chargers to advance to the Super Bowl. So that's what I expect, the Chargers versus the Niners. And this is actually what I predicted last season. So a bit of a rehashing, but these teams haven't fallen off. They're still really good, and I believe it's time for them to get it done. So the Chargers versus the Niners. It's going to be Northern California versus Southern California in the Super Bowl. And as much as I want to take my Chargers, I think this is where they charger it and let it go. I will take the Niners, who have just been there so close so many times. They have a total all-star roster. I mean, so do the Chargers in many respects, but I think at this point, Kyle Shanahan will figure it out. And as much as I like Kellen Moore, the head coach is still Brandon Staley, and they might go for it on 4th down and just not convert. It's going to be unfortunate for me, but I will sadly go with the Niners to win the Super Bowl. That's my pick. That's what I see happening, and it's going to be very fun to see if this actually does happen. Honestly, there's a legit chance that the Chiefs do not finish as the number 1 seed, and this AFC playoff picture looks very different. It's possible the Chargers get the division themselves, but I do see them going to the Super Bowl at least. Going to be a fun year, and we will see what happens. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.